The market was crowded that morning.
my
It was the
God.
first Saturday of autumn, and the whole town had come to buy and sell. Farmers push carts. Children ran between wooden stalls. Rich people in fancy clothes walked slowly, looking at horses and cattle like they were choosing furniture. Eleanor stood at the edge of everything, trying to disappear. She had been working at the royal estate for exactly 1 month. 30 days of cleaning stables, carrying heavy bags of hay, washing the mud from expensive saddles. Her hands had become rough and cut. Her fingernails were always dirty now. Her back hurt constantly, but she needed this job. Without it, she had nothing. The old rancher named Mr. Hartley had promised her payment today. He said he would give her money, real coins, that she could use to buy food and pay her small cottage rent. Eleanor had counted the days. She had walked the market because she thought maybe, just maybe, she could buy something special, maybe new shoes, maybe medicine for the cough that would not leave her chest. But Mr. Hartley had other plans. He found her near the vegetable stalls, and his face told her everything before his words did. He was not holding coins. He was holding a rope, and at the end of that rope was a donkey. Eleanor's breath stopped. The donkey was the color of old ash. Its fur was matted and thick, like it had never been brushed. One ear bent forward at a strange angle, broken, probably, and healed wrong. Its body was thin. Not just thin. The bones showed through its sides like an X-ray picture. The ribs were visible, each one like a thin stick under gray skin. One of its front hooves was wrapped in dirty cloth that looked infected. The cloth was yellowing and stained with something dark. But the worst part was the eyes. They were empty, not angry, not sad, just empty. The donkey's eyes looked like they had stopped hoping for anything good a long time ago. "Here is your payment," Mr. Hartley said loudly. Too loudly, he wanted people to hear. The market had become quiet. Not completely quiet. People still moved around, but Eleanor could feel the attention shifting toward them like a spotlight. Farmers turned their heads. A group of ranch hands stopped talking and started watching. A woman in an expensive blue dress actually stopped walking to stare. Eleanor felt her face become hot, red, burning. I'm sorry," she said quietly. "The donkey," Mr. Hartley repeated, still loud. "That is your month's wages. 1 month of work. 1 donkey. That is fair." Eleanor's heart was beating so fast that she felt like she could not breathe properly. But you said you would pay me coins. Real money. I need to buy." "This donkey is worth coins," Mr. Hartley interrupted. His voice was cold. "More than coins, actually. This is a real animal. It has value. Take it or leave it. But I do not hold on to animals that cannot work. So you will take this one and you will give it a home. Or I will simply let it go into the forest, and the wolves will have it." He said the last part looking directly at the donkey. The implication was clear. He did not care if the animal lived or died. Eleanor looked at the rope in his hands. She looked at the donkey. She looked at the crowd of people who were now definitely watching. A young man in the crowd laughed, a cruel sound that traveled across the market. A woman whispered something to her friend, and they both looked at Eleanor and smiled mean smiles. Eleanor understood. This was not a mistake. This was punishment. This was Mr. Hartley showing everyone that Eleanor was not really a worker. She was nothing. She was so low that he could give her a broken animal instead of money. And no one would stop him. No one would care. The donkey made a small noise, not a loud bray, but something quieter. Something that sounded like pain mixed with hopelessness. It was a sound that Eleanor had never heard from an animal before. It was a sound of suffering. "Ah, okay," Eleanor heard herself say. The words came out quiet and small, like they belonged to someone else. Someone smaller than her. Someone even less important. Mr. Hartley pushed the rope into her hands. The rope was rough and smelled like sweat and dirt. The donkey did not resist. It simply followed, its broken hooves making hollow sounds on the ground. As Eleanor turned to walk away from the market, she felt every eye on her. The young man laughed again. The woman in the blue dress shook her head like Eleanor was the saddest thing she had ever seen. An old farmer near the fruit stalls actually said something loud enough for Eleanor to hear. The widow is as broken as the donkey. Perfect match. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Eleanor walked faster, keeping her eyes down. The donkey followed behind, and every step sounded like it hurt. The rope was slack between them. The donkey was not resisting, not fighting, not even trying. It was simply accepting what was happening, the way it had probably accepted everything bad that had ever happened to it. The market gradually faded behind her as Eleanor walked toward the edge of town. Her chest was tight and painful. Her eyes were wet, but she refused to cry. Not in front of anyone. Not where people could see. The sun was beginning to move toward the afternoon. The sky was gray and heavy, like it might rain soon. The wind was cold. It carried the smell of coming winter. Eleanor had no coat thick enough for winter. She had been saving her coins to buy one. But now there would be no coins. There would only be this animal, this suffering, broken creature that no one wanted. She looked back once at the donkey. It was struggling to keep up, limping on the injured hoof, its breathing loud and difficult. Its eyes were still empty, still hopeless. And Eleanor realized something in that moment that would change everything. She was not alone in being unwanted. She was not the only one in the world that people had thrown away. This small, broken donkey had been rejected just like she had been rejected. It had been treated like garbage, like something with no value. And now they were both walking together toward an uncertain future, with nothing but each other and the cold coming winter. For the first time since her husband had died, Eleanor felt something other than despair. She felt something strange and new. She felt needed. She slowed her pace, so the donkey would not have to struggle so hard. She softened her grip on the rope. She did not know what she would do with this animal. She did not know how she would feed it, or care for it, or what came next. But she knew this much. Neither of them would be alone anymore. And that was the moment when the story truly began. Eleanor's cottage was small, very small. It had been built maybe 100 years ago, when people did not need much space. The walls were made of gray stone that was cold even in summer. The roof leaked in 3 places when it rained hard. The floor was dirt covered with old wooden boards that bent under footsteps. There were only 2 rooms, one where Eleanor slept on a thin mattress, and one where she cooked and ate. She had never imagined sharing this space with another living creature. It was late in the afternoon when Eleanor finally arrived at the cottage with the donkey. The sun was orange and low, sliding down the sky like it was tired and wanted sleep. The air was becoming cold. Eleanor could see her own breath coming out like small clouds of smoke. Autumn was ending. Winter was coming fast. She could feel in the way the wind moved, sharper now, with teeth. Eleanor tied the donkey to a wooden post outside the cottage. The post was old and the rope was old, but they would have to work for now. The donkey stood completely still, as if even the act of standing was too difficult. Its head hung down. Its breathing was heavy and slow. For a long moment, Eleanor simply stood and looked at the animal. Really looked at it for the first time without the shame of the market crowding her mind. The donkey's fur was matted so badly that Eleanor could not see the actual skin underneath. There were places where the hair had fallen out completely, showing pale skin underneath. The donkey's ribs were not just visible, they were painful to look at. Every single rib showed clearly. Eleanor could count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The ribs went on, like a skeleton wearing thin skin. The injured hoof was worse up close. The cloth wrapped around it was so dirty that Eleanor could not tell what color it had been originally. The cloth was stuck to the skin with something dark and crusty. It smelled bad. Infected, definitely infected. Maybe the infection had already reached the bone. Maybe the hoof was dying. The donkey's ears were the worst, though. One ear, the broken one, was bent at a sharp angle. But the other ear was covered in old scars. Deep scars. The kind of scars that meant someone had hit the donkey, repeatedly, with something heavy. Eleanor felt something break inside her chest. It was not sadness exactly. It was anger, real anger, the kind that burned. She went inside the cottage and gathered what few things she had. An old blanket, her only blanket, but she took it anyway. A pot of water. a cloth for cleaning. She came back outside as the sun was disappearing completely, leaving only purple and blue light in the sky. Eleanor approached the donkey slowly, the way she had learned to approach frightened animals. The donkey's entire body became tense. The muscles under that thin skin went hard. The donkey's breathing became even more rapid. It was preparing to run or fight. "It is okay," Eleanor whispered. She kept her voice very low and very gentle. "I will not hurt you. I promise." The donkey did not relax. Its eyes, those empty, hopeless eyes, were now wide. Terrified, Eleanor moved slower. She wrapped the blanket around the donkey's body, being very careful not to touch the broken hoof or the injured areas. The blanket was small, but it covered the donkey's back and sides. Immediately, she saw the animal's breathing slow just slightly. The warmth was helping. Then Eleanor did something that would change the direction of this entire story. She sat down in the dirt next to the donkey and simply began to cry. Not quiet tears. Not the kind of crying that could be stopped or hidden. Eleanor wept. Her entire body shook. Her face became wet. Her breath came in gasps. She cried for her husband who had died. She cried for the unfairness of the market. She cried for every person who had ever been treated like nothing. She cried for the small, broken animal that had suffered so much. And then something happened that Eleanor did not expect. The donkey lowered its head and touched Eleanor's shoulder with its nose. The touch was gentle, soft. It was not what Eleanor had thought would happen. She had thought the donkey would stay away. She had thought the animal would fear her, would see her as just another human coming to cause pain. But instead, the donkey had moved closer. The donkey had chosen to comfort her. Eleanor looked up at the donkey's face. The animal's eyes were different now. Still sad, still damaged, but not completely empty anymore. Something was there, some small flicker of recognition, some small understanding that Eleanor was also broken. "What is your name?" Eleanor asked the donkey, even though it could not answer. "I need to call you something." She thought for a moment, her hand touching the donkey's neck. The animal's heartbeat was visible under the thin skin, rapid, nervous, but present, alive. Despite everything, still alive. "Grace," Eleanor said finally, "that is your name. Grace. Because you have shown me grace even though I am a stranger, even though you have no reason to trust me." Over the next weeks, Eleanor's life became completely different. She would wake before dawn and immediately go outside to check on Grace. The donkey was always awake, waiting, as if she spent all night watching and hoping that Eleanor would return. Eleanor would spend hours every day caring for the injured hoof, cleaning it very carefully with warm water and cloth, then wrapping it with fresh materials that she made from strips of her old clothes. The infection was very bad. At one point, Eleanor was certain that Grace would lose the hoof completely. The donkey could barely walk. She would limp slowly from one corner of the small field to another, her breathing labored, her body trembling. Eleanor would watch from the cottage, her heart tight with worry. But Eleanor did not give up. She spent her small wages on herbs from a market, expensive herbs that she could barely afford. She made poultices and wrapped them around the infected hoof. She sang to Grace during the long nights, old songs that her mother had taught her, songs about love and survival, and things that were broken but could still be fixed. Slowly, very slowly, the infection improved. The cloth stopped smelling so bad. The swelling went down. Grace's breathing became less labored. And something else changed. Grace's eyes began to look different. The empty hopelessness was still there, but it was becoming mixed with something else. Something that looked like trust. Something that looked like love. Every morning, when Eleanor stepped outside, Grace would make a small sound of greeting. Not a loud bray, just a quiet, gentle sound. And Eleanor would understand. The donkey was saying, "You came back. You did not leave me alone." In those quiet moments, Eleanor and Grace were no longer just a widow and a broken donkey. They were two creatures who had been thrown away, who had found each other, and who were learning to live again. And the whole town was watching. Part 3. The silent suffering that the town could not ignore. Winter came early that year. By November, the first snow had already fallen, covering the world in thick white that made everything cold and difficult. Eleanor had never been so cold in her entire life. The cottage had no real heating except for a small fireplace that consumed wood faster than she could gather it. At night, she would lie on her thin mattress, shaking, her breath visible in the darkness, wondering if morning would come. But Grace was suffering more than Eleanor was. The donkey's condition had improved slowly through autumn. The infected hoof was better, not healed completely, but no longer rotting. Grace could walk without limping quite so severely. The infection had stopped spreading. But winter was different. Winter was cruel. Eleanor had no money for proper hay. She gathered dry grass from the edges of fields where farmers would not miss it. She collected leaves that had fallen from trees. She even pulled bark from branches to give Grace something to eat. It was not enough. Eleanor could see it in the way Grace's ribs still showed through her coat, could see it in the way the donkey moved more slowly, more carefully, as if each step required enormous effort. The other workers at the royal estate began to notice what Eleanor was doing. One morning in late November, Eleanor was gathering wood at the edge of the forest when she heard the laughing. Young voices, men's voices. She turned and saw 5 of the ranch hands standing near her cottage, watching Grace through the fence. "The widow is starving herself to feed the broken donkey," one of them said loudly enough for Eleanor to hear. His name was Samuel, and he had always been cruel. "Look at her. She is nothing but bones. And for what? For an animal that should have died months ago." Another one laughed. Maybe they deserve each other. The broken widow and the broken donkey. 2 useless things together. Eleanor's face became hot. She wanted to run at them, to shout at them to leave Grace alone. But she did not. She had learned that showing anger only made things worse. So she simply walked toward them, her head up, and she stared at them until they finally left, still laughing. That night, Eleanor barely ate. She gave her portion of bread to Grace instead. The donkey ate it carefully, her soft lips touching Eleanor's hand as she took the bread. The touch was gentle, loving. It was the only warmth Eleanor felt in the entire cold house. The weeks passed. December arrived. Snow fell deeper and stayed on the ground. Eleanor's job at the estate became even harder. She had to break ice in the water troughs. She had to carry extra heavy loads of hay for the important horses that the royal family owned. Her hand became cracked and bleeding. Her cough, which had come in autumn, only grew worse. She was dying. Everyone could see it. One afternoon in early December, Eleanor collapsed while carrying hay. She simply fell to her knees in front of everyone. The hay bag dropped. Her vision went dark at the edges. Her body was so cold that she could not remember what warmth felt like. For several seconds, she lay on the frozen ground, and she thought, "This is it. This is how I die." But strong hands lifted her up. It was Mr. Hartley himself, the rancher who had given her Grace. He carried her inside and gave her hot tea. He told her to rest. "You are killing yourself," he said, and Eleanor could not tell if it was anger or worry in his voice. "For what? For a donkey? For an animal that is not even yours?" Eleanor did not answer. She could not explain that she was not living for the donkey. The donkey was living for her. Grace was the reason Eleanor got up every morning. Grace was the reason, she continued, when everything seemed hopeless. But Mr. Hartley did something unexpected. He brought Eleanor warm blankets. He told the other workers to give her lighter jobs. He even, though he tried to hide it, left extra hay outside her cottage one morning. Eleanor found it there, still warm from somewhere, clearly meant for Grace. Word about Eleanor and Grace began to spread through the town. By the middle of December, people were talking. Not all of it was kind. Some people called Eleanor foolish. Some said she was wasting her life on an animal that would die anyway. But some people, older women especially, began to leave small things outside her cottage. A bundle of hay, a bag of grain. Someone even left a blanket. Eleanor never discovered who left these things. She would find them in the morning and weep with gratitude. She would wrap the blanket around Grace. She would give Grace the grain, watching the donkey eat with more strength than before. The turning point came on the coldest night of the winter. It was December 20th. The temperature had dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the cottage walls. Eleanor had given Grace almost all of her hay. She herself had eaten nothing but thin soup for 3 days. She was so weak that she could barely stand. Her cough had become so severe that she was coughing blood into the cloth she held to her mouth. That night, Eleanor could not get out of bed. Her body simply would not move. She lay under her thin blankets, shaking, and she understood that this was the end. She was going to die here, alone, in this cold cottage, and Grace would be alone again. But then she heard something. A noise. Outside. A commotion. Voices. Many voices. Eleanor managed to drag herself to the window. There were people, dozens of people, standing in the snow outside her cottage. They were holding lanterns. They were carrying bundles of hay, bags of grain, blankets, and food. They were standing in the freezing cold, all of them watching her cottage. One woman, the one in the fancy blue dress from the market, the one who had watched Eleanor receive Grace, stepped forward. She knocked on the door. When Eleanor managed to open it, the woman's face showed shock. Eleanor was skeletal, thin. Her eyes were sunk back in her head. Her skin was nearly blue from cold. "Oh, my God," the woman whispered. "What have you done to yourself?" Eleanor could not answer. She could only stand there, confused, as the woman and the other people rushed inside. They brought heat. They brought food. They brought medicine and blankets and care. And then, one by one, all these people went outside to see Grace. They stood around the donkey, and Eleanor heard something she never expected to hear. She heard people crying. The rancher Samuel, who had laughed at Eleanor and Grace, was crying. The young woman in the blue dress was on her knees in the snow beside Grace, her hand shaking as she touched the donkey's neck. "It is her," the woman kept saying. "Oh, my God, it is actually her." Eleanor did not understand, but she would soon, and everything would change. It was a cold morning in late spring. The winter had finally released its grip on the land, and green things were beginning to grow again. Eleanor had been caring for Grace for almost 8 months. The donkey's coat was thick and healthy now. The infected hoof had completely healed. Grace could walk without pain. She could run, though she rarely did. Trust, Eleanor had learned, did not come back quickly after it had been broken so badly. Eleanor was braiding Grace's mane, something she did most mornings. She had picked wildflowers from the field behind the cottage, and she was weaving them into the donkey's thick dark hair. Blue flowers and yellow flowers and white flowers made a beautiful pattern. Grace stood completely still during this ritual, her eyes closed, her breathing calm. It was their special moment together, the moment when they were not a widow and a broken donkey. They were simply two creatures who loved each other. That was when Eleanor heard the sound of a horse approaching. It was not a common sound near the cottage. Eleanor lived at the very edge of the royal estate, in the forgotten places where rich people did not usually go. She looked up and saw a figure on horseback coming down the dirt road toward her small home. As the horse came closer, Eleanor recognized the woman. It was the same woman who had been at the market that terrible day months ago, the one in the expensive blue dress, the one who had stared at Eleanor and Grace with such mean eyes, the one who had smiled that cruel smile. Eleanor felt her body become tense. Her hands stopped braiding. Grace sensed a change immediately. The donkey moved closer to Eleanor, as if protecting her. The woman dismounted from her horse. She was tall and moved with the kind of confidence that came from being born into money. Her dress was even more expensive than the one Eleanor remembered, made of soft fabric, with real pearls sewn into it. Her shoes were leather, perfectly polished. Everything about her said that she came from a different world than Eleanor's. "Hello," the woman said. Her voice was different than Eleanor expected. It was not mean. It was not cold. It was actually shaking slightly. The woman's eyes were fixed on Grace. Only on Grace. She was not looking at Eleanor at all. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked carefully. She did not trust this woman. The memory of the market was still fresh. The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, She walked toward Grace very slowly. Her eyes were becoming wet. Tears were filling them up, threatening to spill over. She reached out one hand toward the donkey, but she stopped before touching. "May I?" she asked Eleanor. "May I touch her?" Eleanor was confused, but she nodded. The woman's hand touched Grace's neck. The moment her fingers made contact with the donkey's fur, the woman made a small sound, like something breaking inside her. She touched Grace's face, her ears, her back. She was touching the donkey like she was trying to memorize every single detail, like the donkey might disappear if she did not hold on tightly enough. "It is you," the woman whispered. "It is really you, after all this time." "I do not understand," Eleanor said. "Do you know this donkey?" The woman turned to look at Eleanor. Her face was completely wet with tears now. Her eyes were red. She looked like she might collapse at any moment. "My name is Catherine," the woman said. "I am the daughter of the royal estate owner. And this donkey belonged to my daughter, my little girl. Her name was Emma. She was 8 years old when—" The woman's voice broke. She could not continue. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. The pieces of a puzzle were beginning to come together. Catherine sat down in the dirt. She did not care that her expensive dress was getting dirty. She did not care about anything except telling this story. "Emma loved this donkey more than anything in the world," Catherine continued. This was Gracie. Emma named her. She would come out every single morning to be with Gracie. They would spend hours together. And then one day, my husband decided that Gracie was not valuable enough. She was not a beautiful horse. She could not be trained for riding or racing. She was just a small donkey with no purpose. According to him, he ordered the stable workers to sell her. He said she was taking up space. Catherine's hands were shaking as she spoke. "I did not know what was happening," Catherine said. "The workers took Gracie away to some breeding farm. A terrible place. I found out after it was too late. Emma asked for Gracie every single day for weeks. Every single morning, she would wake up and ask, 'When is Gracie coming home?' And I had to tell her the truth. Her father had sold her best friend." Eleanor felt her own tears beginning now. "Emma changed after that," Catherine said, her voice becoming even quieter. "She became quiet. She stopped laughing. She stopped playing. She started saying things about how our family did not care about anything except money, about how we valued expensive things but did not value love or loyalty or small creatures who could not make us rich. When she was 10 years old, she left. She went to live with my sister in another city. She said she could not bear to live in a house where things she loved were thrown away." Catherine looked at Eleanor with desperate eyes. "That was 10 years ago," Catherine said. "I have not seen my daughter in 10 years. I have missed her childhood. I have missed watching her grow. My husband and we have spent years trying to find Gracie, to find a way to bring her back, to somehow fix what we had broken. But Gracie disappeared. We heard she had escaped from the breeding farm. We heard she had been passed from farm to farm, abused and rejected. We thought she was probably dead by now." Catherine reached out and touched Grace again, her fingers very gentle. "But she is here," Catherine whispered. "And someone who had nothing, someone who was treated just as badly as Gracie. Someone loved her. Someone saved her. Someone did what I could not do." Catherine looked at Eleanor now, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "The market that day," Catherine said slowly. "It was you. You were the woman with the donkey. I was so cruel to you. I thought you were nobody, but you were becoming her hero." Eleanor could not speak. Her throat was closed. Her heart was beating very fast. "I need to ask you something," Catherine said, standing up. "And I need you to answer me honestly. What do you want? What would make your life better? Money? A house? Anything. Name it. I will give it to you. Because you have done something for my daughter and for my family that no amount of money could ever do. You have shown my daughter that there are people in this world who love without expecting anything in return. You have shown that sometimes broken things can be fixed." Eleanor looked at Grace. The donkey was calm, peaceful, beautiful. healthy, loved. I want to keep her, Eleanor said simply. I want to keep Grace. That is all I want. Catherine's face changed. A smile appeared, a real smile, full of understanding and relief. Then Grace is yours, Catherine said, forever. And Eleanor understood that everything was about to change again. Reckoning and the homecoming. Everything changed in the weeks that followed Catherine's visit. Eleanor woke one morning to find workers building a new cottage next to her old one. The new cottage had a proper wooden floor, not dirt. It had real windows with glass that let in light. It had a kitchen with a stone stove for cooking. It had 2 bedrooms and a living room. Catherine had kept her promise. Eleanor was no longer poor. She was no longer invisible. But the cottage was not the real change. The real change came on a summer evening, when Catherine arrived with a young woman Eleanor had never seen before. The young woman had Catherine's eyes, but they were different. These eyes held sadness and something harder, the kind of hardness that comes from disappointment. Eleanor, Catherine said gently, this is my daughter, Emma. Eleanor's breath caught. This was a little girl who had loved Grace so much that losing the donkey had broken her heart. But now she was grown. She was 18 years old. She was a woman, not a child. Emma looked at Eleanor with complicated feelings showing on her face. She looked angry. She looked hopeful. She looked afraid. She looked like someone who wanted to believe in love, but had been hurt too badly to trust it. You have Grace? Emma asked. Her voice was quiet and careful. Yes, Eleanor said simply. Come, I will show you. They walked together to the field where Grace spent her days. It was late afternoon. The sun was golden and warm. The grass was thick and green. And Grace was standing in the middle of the field, watching them approach, her ears forward, her breathing calm. The moment Grace saw Emma, something shifted in the donkey's body. Grace's eyes went wide. She made a small sound, a sound Eleanor had never heard her make before. Not a bray, not a neigh, something older, something that sounded like recognition. Grace began to walk toward Emma. It was not the careful walk of a donkey with an injured hoof. It was not the hesitant walk of a broken animal that feared humans. It was a quick, purposeful walk. The walk of a creature who had been searching for someone for a very long time and had finally found them again. Emma began to run. She ran across the field with her arms open, tears already streaming down her face. When she reached Grace, she threw her arms around the donkey's neck and sobbed. Hard, deep sobs that came from somewhere very far inside her, from a place that had been closed off and locked away for 10 years. Gracie, Emma cried. Oh, Gracie, I thought I had lost you. I thought I would never see you again. I am so sorry. I am so sorry I left. I am so sorry I could not save you. Grace stood completely still. The donkey's eyes were closed. Her ears were forward. She was receiving Emma's love the way a person receives water after dying of thirst. Eleanor watched from several feet away. Catherine stood beside her, also crying, also watching her daughter be reunited with a creature she had loved most in the world. She never gave up on you, Catherine whispered to Eleanor. All these years, Emma has been thinking about Gracie, wondering if she was alive, hoping that somewhere someone was taking care of her. And you were that person. You were the miracle we did not know to ask for. That evening, Eleanor prepared a special meal, not the simple food she usually made. Catherine had brought ingredients, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, wine. They sat together in Eleanor's new cottage, Eleanor, Catherine, and Emma, while Grace stayed close outside, visible through the window, no longer separated from Emma. Emma told them her story. She had lived with her aunt in the city for 10 years. She had been angry, so angry at her father for selling Grace, so angry at her mother for not stopping him, so angry at a world that treated innocent creatures like objects to be thrown away when they were not useful. She had refused to come home. She had refused to forgive. But something had changed when she turned 18. She realized that her anger was only hurting herself. It was not hurting her father. It was not bringing Grace back. It was just making her smaller and colder and more broken. I decided to come home, Emma said. I decided to forgive my parents, even though what they did was wrong. I decided to try to understand that people make mistakes, even terrible ones. But I still thought Grace was gone. I thought I would never see her again. And then Mother told me about you. Emma looked at Eleanor with eyes full of gratitude and wonder. You saved her, Emma said. Not just her body, her spirit. You loved her when nobody else would. You gave her a reason to live when everything in her life had taught her that love was impossible. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. For the first time since her husband had died, she felt like she mattered, like her life had purpose, like she had done something important. There is something else, Catherine said carefully. My husband, he wants to apologize. He wants to make things right. He has offered to give Eleanor ownership of this land, this cottage, the fields, everything. It belongs to you now, Eleanor. Legally, nobody can take it away. Eleanor's hands began to shake. She could not speak. Over the next weeks, something magical happened. Emma began to come to the cottage every single day. She would spend hours with Grace, braiding wildflowers into her mane, grooming her coat until it shined, simply sitting in the grass with her head against the donkey's side. The anger in Emma's eyes began to soften. Eleanor would watch and understand that Grace was healing Emma just as Eleanor had healed Grace. And Eleanor was no longer alone. Catherine began coming regularly. She brought Eleanor seeds for a garden. She brought Eleanor books. She brought Eleanor friendship. The estate owner, Emma's father, came once, and he did not say much. But he stood in the field for a long time, watching Grace and Emma together, and Eleanor could see tears on his face. He had learned what he had lost by valuing money more than love. By autumn, everything had changed completely. Eleanor no longer cleaned stables for wages. She owned land now. She worked in her own garden, where vegetables grew in neat rows. She shared meals with Catherine and Emma. She had become part of a family that had learned the hard way how precious love truly is. Grace did not become a famous show donkey. She did not win ribbons or compete in races. She simply lived in the field behind Eleanor's cottage, eating good food, breathing clean air, loved completely by two humans who had been broken and had learned to heal. On winter evenings, Eleanor and Emma would sit by the fire, while Grace stood in her shelter, warm and safe. They would tell stories. They would laugh. Sometimes they would cry, not from sadness, but from the kind of tears that come when you understand how close you came to losing something precious. One night, Emma said something that Eleanor would remember for the rest of her life. Grace never forgave the people who hurt her, Emma said, but she learned to trust again. She learned that not all humans are cruel. She learned that love is possible. She taught me the same thing. And because of Grace, I came home. Because of Grace, my family began to heal. Eleanor looked out the window at Grace, visible in the moonlight, standing peaceful in her field. The donkey that nobody wanted to become the bridge that brought a broken family back together. She had never run in a race. She had never won a ribbon. She had never been beautiful by the world's standards. But Grace had done something far more valuable. She had taught everyone who knew her that broken things can be loved, that small things matter, that the most important victories are not the ones that the world applauds, but the ones that happen in quiet fields, between creatures who have learned that they are not alone. And sometimes the greatest gift one broken creature can give another is simply this: I see your suffering. I understand your pain, and I will stay with you. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. You are loved,